So this is Intermediate Algebra, lesson number 10.3 in Intermediate Algebra. I need to go ahead and get a bigger pen here so you can see my writing a little bit better. Alright, the name of this lesson is Additional Items Involving Solutions to Equations. Alright, that's just kind of a big-winded name for doing some stuff that's not too terrible. So, anyway, the first thing we're going to do is talk about the discriminant. And the discriminant is just a big word for, you remember in the last lesson you learned this one? All over 2a. Alright, we learned that was called the quadratic formula. And we also learned that anytime you're given a quadratic equation, any quadratic equation in the whole history of the universe, and a quadratic equation looks basically like this. Okay, it's got an x that's squared, an x that doesn't have anything on it, and then no x at all, and it equals 0. And you're trying to find out what x is. And remember, this first letter was your A, this was the B, and this was the C, and you put those numbers in the equation and you're able to solve it. Alright, but there's something else that we can get out of the quadratic equation, and doggone it, I can't get rid of this equation that's down there. I hate it when that happens. Alright, anyway, what we can do is we can find out some information about the answers that we're going to get depending on what this answer is in there. Alright, so let's say for an example, and let's change this 2 here to a 3, just so it's different than the first two. Alright, so what we've got there is a method to find out what our answer looks like. Alright, so for example, if we put our numbers in here, our A, B, and C in here, and we solve it, and let's say that we get a negative answer inside this red circle here. If the answer is negative, then we have the square root of a negative number. Let's just say we get square root of negative 4. Well, you know automatically that that is an imaginary number or a complex solution. Okay? So if this number inside this red circle here, when you solve it, is negative, and remember this plus or minus here, means that we get two answers, and both of those answers are going to be complex, meaning they have an I in them. Okay, so if your answer is negative, you're going to get an answer, or two answers, with an I in your answer. Let's say that you put all the numbers in that red circle, b squared minus 4ac, and let's say we get a 0 for an answer. Nothing is in there. That means that we get one rational answer. Rational answer means, you know, an answer like 4 or 6 or 3/4 or something like that. Because if this is a 0 in here, we have plus or minus 0, which the plus or minus doesn't matter anymore because our answer is 0, so we only get one answer instead of two, because any number plus 0 is that number, any number minus 0 is that number. So we get the same number regardless when we add or subtract 0 from it. So we get one answer. What happens if we put our number in here and we get a positive number like 16? Okay, we put a number in there, or we get a number answer like 16. Well, what happens when we take the square root of 16? We get 4. So we get plus or minus 4, or whatever the square root of that number is. So we get two answers that are rational. I mean, they're just regular old numbers. Okay, so if we get an answer that is a number that we can take the square root of, we're going to take the square root of it and get a plus or minus number. We're going to get two answers that are just regular old numbers. Let's say we get a positive number that is not a square root. Like maybe we get 7. Well, we get the square root of 7 then, because the number we get here is a 7. The square root of that 7 is going to be the square root of 7. So we're going to get something plus or minus the square root of 7. So we're going to get two answers. We're going to get a plus or minus, and they're going to have a square root in the answer. They're called irrational solutions. It means when you have something irrational, it means it's going to have a square root. Okay, so let's look at this real quick again. If when we put the numbers in here we get a negative answer, we get two imaginary numbers for our answer. When we get a 0 when we put all these together, we get one answer, and that one answer is just a regular old number. Okay? When we get a number in here that's positive, but we can take the square root of that number, we get two answers that are regular old rational solutions without square roots on them, because if this were a square root of 16, we take the square root sign off and we just get 4. So there's no radical anymore. So that means it's a rational solution. If we get a number in here that we cannot take the square root of, we get two answers with square root signs, because if we can't take the square root of it, then the square root sign has to stay on it. So like the square root of 7 would give us two answers with square root signs. Alright, so all of that to say, we are going to go ahead and practice a couple of these. Okay, this is the first example. What we're going to do is we're going to assign A, B, and C. Remember our quadratic formula, we have an A, B, and a C. Our A is here, our B is here, and our C is there. Okay, so our A is 1, our B is -3, and our C is -40. Okay, not too bad. Now we're going to look at our discriminant, which is B squared minus 4AC. The part of the equation that's underneath the radical sign when we do the quadratic formula. Okay? So all we care about is what is under the radical sign. So let's plug the numbers in there that we've got. B squared, so -3, we're going to square it, minus 4 times A times C. Oops, 40. 40. There we go. Alright, so we get 9 minus 4 times -40 is -160. So we get 9 plus 160, which equals 169. So, when we get a discriminant, our discriminant is 169. We look back on page 617, bottom of the page, and it tells you what happens if you get a discriminant that's a certain thing, like we had said earlier. Well, this discriminant is the third one down. It's a positive number that is a perfect square, meaning, can I take the square root of that number? Yes, I can. That means your answer is two rational solutions. So that's all they want down. Two rational solutions is your answer. Okay, we will pick it up with 10.3 B as in boy as we go to that second example there.